For more, let's bring in Nikole Killion and Alex Horton. Nikole is a CBS News congressional correspondent, and Alex is a national security reporter for The Washington Post, who just got back from Ukraine. Thank you both for being with us tonight. Nikole, you followed Supreme Court nominee Ketanji Brown Jackson today. Former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, who was tapped to guide her around, had this to say about expectations on Republican support.
We don't put expectations on anything. You know, we want to get as many votes as we can. I think she deserves that. If people really look at her record, I think she deserves a bipartisan vote, but we'll see. Every senator, I know this from personal experience, every senator is going to make their own determination about what they believe is the right thing and the right vote.
And Nikole, this is just day one of a long slug ahead for Judge Jackson, who will be meeting with several lawmakers. What can you tell us about how they went today?
Well, that's right. As you heard there from former Alabama Senator Doug Jones, who's kind of serving as that White House Sherpa, ushering and escorting Judge Jackson around. You know, he seemed very pleased with this first day of meetings. He told me that, this was a very good day, a very pleasant meetings, and so they expect this to continue in earnest, especially now that confirmation hearings have been announced for March 21st. He did tell a group of reporters, including CBS News this afternoon, that he is hopeful about this timetable to try to confirm Judge Jackson by the Easter recess. That is the timetable that Senate Democrats have set, and so he said that they intend to keep meeting with senators, as many senators as they can, ahead of these hearings, but also all the way up until that final vote that we see on the Senate floor, that we expect to eventually see on the Senate floor. As for lawmakers' impressions, Leader Schumer was among the first to meet with Judge Jackson today. He described her using three words that began with B. He said that she is brilliant, that she is beloved, and that she belongs. She belongs on the Supreme Court. Also, Senator Durbin also had high marks and praise for Judge Jackson. And as far as Republicans are concerned, they're taking a bit more of a wait-and-see approach. I had a chance to ask Leader McConnell what he wanted to hear from Judge Jackson today. He didn't really respond to those questions, but ahead of meeting her today, he did express concerns about what he said was a very slim appellate record. As far as Judge Jackson's record is concerned, he also said that he is concerned that, she is this pick from the, far left, from these dark money groups. But he also said that he wanted to have a very thoughtful and thorough process. So, as far as Senator Grassley, who's the ranking member on the Senate Judiciary Committee, who also met with Judge Jackson today, he said that he wants to ensure that this is a fair and deliberative process, a dignified process. One thing I have heard consistently from both sides of the aisle up here is that, no one wants this to be another Kavanaugh. They felt that particular confirmation hearing got really ugly, where you're diving into, a judge's yearbook, and so they don't really want it to devolve into a petty process. So from that standpoint, there does seem to be agreement on all sides that they do want this to be a very orderly, dignified, fair, but also expeditious process, at least according to Democrats. And worth noting that Judge Jackson said that she did have a good day of meetings.
And much more to come. Alex, you're just back from Ukraine. I want to ask you about your reporting and what you saw there, especially in light of the president's State of the Union address. Of course, he spoke about the conflict very passionately, as he has been doing. Do you think that he got it right in painting this picture of what Ukrainians are facing right now?
I think so. I mean, he expressed these terms of, existential crisis, what's happening in Ukraine, and that's exactly right. The assessment from the very beginning has been that Russia wants to topple the Ukrainian government and not just expand its holding in the East and consolidate their gains there since 2014 and also in Crimea, but to take over the whole country and install a government that's loyal to them. So, they're fighting for their lives, all over the country. So he had that right. He was also right when it came to talking about the NATO alliance and how they're strengthening their partnership. This is in light also of the past guy, right? President Trump sowed many divisions and created a lot of tension in NATO, and it made some of the the NATO countries, second guess the longevity and the commitment of the United States when it comes to, the NATO partnership. And, in the worst way possible, the Russian invasion of Ukraine has recommitted that idea, but it's also been a shock to the system across Western Europe and Eastern Europe about how serious the threat Russia can become. And that's translated into, other commitments like Romania, for example. They're now interested in more permanent U.S. troop presence there, like they rotate through Poland right now. You have other Baltic nations that are interested in deepening their relationships. So, this is an example of why the relationship is there and how important it is. But, what is also interesting in this case too is, especially after Afghanistan and the U.S. wanting to turn a corner on the Middle East and in Afghanistan, they wanted to focus on China this year as their number one priority when it comes to defense and deterrence. And no one really had it on their bingo card that, there's going to be another land war in Asia. So, the NATO commitment and the NATO partnership in 2022 is, surprisingly robust after everything that happened.
No doubt that Xi Jinping is carefully watching how this is unfolding. The president, of course, put foreign policy on center stage last night, but he also had to tackle so many domestic problems here at home. So, Nikole, I wonder what the reaction is on Capitol Hill about what the president had to say about getting inflation under control. I mean, this is something that he's talked about already so many times. And I think he tried to present something new last night, but did it click with lawmakers on the Hill?
Well, look, it remains to be seen. Certainly, there is a concern among Democrats and Republicans about the skyrocketing inflation and how to get it under control. What Republicans have been saying is that we've been sounding the alarm on this for some time now, and they feel that, Democrats, including the administration, have really been slow to respond and to take this seriously. I did have some Republicans say, look, they would be willing to work with the president, with the White House on potential policy areas, where inflation could come down. But I think, the devil will obviously be in the details. In terms of Democrats, they have said that this will be a priority for them going forward. In fact, Senate Democrats in particular are already planning to roll out a number of proposals and different pieces of legislation to try to address, rising costs, whether it's trying to deal with the supply chain issue. You heard the president last night talk about the issue of price gouging. And so I had a top Senate Democrat tell me, their hope is that is an issue in an area where they can look into a little further, perhaps hold some hearings in that space. We've also heard Democrats float things, for instance, like possibly suspending the federal gas tax. That's an idea that's already been introduced among Senate Democrats. So they are looking for ways to try to tackle this problem. But again, whether it's one where we see a bipartisan effort, again, kind of remains to be seen.
And after the president spoke, we not only heard the Republican response, but a very critical one from Congresswoman Rashida Tlaib. Tell us about how that illustrates the challenges that he faces going forward and the significance of not hearing the phrase "Build Back Better," speaking of words that begin with B, because it's almost become tainted after that's all we heard at the White House for months and months.
Absolutely. And, I think besides the president's comments about Ukraine last night, the fact that he did not once say those words, build back better, which are words he has been saying since, in essence, like the start of his campaign, was, I think, pretty telling about where the White House and where Democrats feel that this particular agenda is. Look, the president, Democratic leaders have indicated this is something that they don't want to give up on, even though West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin was very clear at the end of last year that he did not intend to support this package. And I think at this stage of the game, Democrats have kind of come to terms with that, and they realize that they have got to kind of come up with a different way to try to salvage some of these proposals. So that's why I think you heard the president use some different language last night. I think he said it was building back a better America, but still pitching some of those same ideas with respect to lowering prescription drug cost and lowering healthcare cost and, tackling energy and climate change and child care. So from that standpoint, again, the sentiment here on the Hill is that maybe they can parcel some pieces of that agenda out. What is very interesting to note is that after the speech, West Virginia Senator Joe Manchin seemed to think that, Build Back Better, in his view, was still dead. He said that he didn't feel that there was a way to necessarily, spend more to try to bring inflation down. So in terms of, the president and the White House trying to pitch this as a way to get inflation down, he didn't seem to buy that argument. But then today he did this interview with Politico where he suggested perhaps a skinnier or slimmed down package that he thought perhaps could win some support, saying that he has been having some informal talks with the White House. But again, I think this continues to be an ongoing discussion about the path forward on this legislation. At the end of the day, I think Democrats still would like to be able to deliver on some parts of this agenda if they can.
Right, because as costs rise, the president is also warning that the conflict in Europe right now could have a cost here at home when it comes to energy. And that is why so many people wanted to hear what he had to say. So, Alex, I want to ask you more about what's happening there. I think, we've heard so much analysis about how Russians are facing challenges that they did not anticipate. They are not as ahead as they thought they would be. What can you tell us about why? And why you think that, for example, they haven't been able to capture any major cities yet?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few different reasons, and one of them is, they just didn't anticipate the level of resistance that Ukraine would put up. That's sort of evident in their decision not to use like their full spectrum of abilities at once, what you would refer to as combined arms, which is using infantry and tanks and artillery and air support all together to complement each other. They're not doing that. And there's a lot of speculation as to why. One of them, which is, they were too overconfident in their ability just to roll straight to Kiev, that they're on their back foot now, and they didn't know what to do when they got punched in the mouth. Another reason is they didn't really plan for the logistical tail of their long support lines. They came in through Belarus and through Russia, but some of these places, they have a lot of ground to cover. That means they have to bring in lots of fuel. They have to bring lots of food in. And the Pentagon said today that they're having trouble getting both to supporting units. That means some tanks and other vehicles are abandoned. That means they're scrounging for fuel at some places and scrounging for food at some places. And that has had a spiraling effect. Some of these troops have low morale because of this. Some of them are surrendering. There are sort of these ripple effects that when you don't plan and these things start to break down, they start to affect other parts of the mission. And that's what appears to be happening, particularly with this convoy that's outside of Kiev, that's about 40 miles long, that hasn't really moved for the last couple of days. It's all affected by this and their inability to figure out what they need to do. Now, there is going to be a moment where, the Russians are going to take a step back and say, what's not working? Do we need to improve our communication? Do we need to, provide more air cover? Can we afford more air cover and not risk our airplanes? Those are calculations they have to make. But, think of this as, any kind of operation where things happen, they respond, and then they fine tune or they hone their strategy to change it up. We haven't really seen any evidence of them refining this strategy, but we do know it's coming. It's just a matter of common sense that they're going to figure out the kinks in their system and recalibrate everything they need to do. I will say that there has been a lot of resistance in the north and the east, in Kharkiv, which is the second largest city. In the south is where they're making their most gains, especially in Kherson, which is a very strategic port city that's on the Dnieper River that feeds right into the Black Sea. It's been contested for a couple days now. There's been some reporting that the Russians have taken it. The mayor said he agreed to these terms with the Russians to allow some people to get aid and to get people to hospitals in exchange for conditions such as, don't provoke Russians, don't get in large groups, curfew events, that sort of thing. So there are parts where the Russians are advancing. A lot of it's congregated in the south. And a big reason why is they're pretty close to their logistical hub, which is in Crimea. So they're not really far afield when it comes to the south. And as they extend north and as the units east start to move west toward Kiev, that longer tail that becomes a problem in any war and any conflict for any military will start to become a bigger issue.
And we have seen some more aggressive tactics. And of course, this is just the beginning. So it's hard to tell what lies ahead for Ukrainians. Alex Horton and Nikole Killion, thank you both so much for your reporting.